Everyone doubted me until this happened. The nightmare started a week after Sarah Jenkins disappeared. Before that, I just had the regular kind, the ones where I'm falling, or back in architecture school failing a project review. Normal-ish. But these were different. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The images were fragmented, nonsensical at first. A dirt floor, the smell of damp earth and decay, a flickering candle, and always, the whispering, a chorus of voices just beyond the edge of hearing, chanting something I couldn't quite make out. Everyone thought I was losing it again. And honestly, I couldn't blame them. 2 years ago, I was on track, designing skyscrapers, winning awards, the whole 9 yards. Then the accident. I saw things no one should see. After that, the panic attacks started. The agoraphobia, the inability to hold down a job. I ended up back in Hollow Creek, living with my parents, a faded reminder of what I could have been. "It's just anxiety, Elias," Dr. Holloway said, adjusting her glasses. "We've talked about this. Your subconscious is processing trauma." "But what if it's not, Dr. Holloway? What if it's more than that?" I pleaded. "What if it's a message?" She sighed, the sound heavy with patience. "Elias, we've been through this. You're fixating. Remember the grounding techniques we discussed?" My parents were less subtle. My mother, Margaret, would pat my hand and tell me to stop watching so much true crime. My father, Robert, would just shake his head and mutter about finding me some work. "Sitting around all day, dwelling on things. It's not healthy, son," he'd say, his voice rough but not unkind. "You need to get out. Get your mind off things." Easy for him to say. He didn't wake up screaming every night. Sarah Jenkins had only been in Hollow Creek for a few weeks, renting a room above Hemlock's Curios, the antique shop on Main Street. I'd seen her once, browsing through a box of old photographs. She had this kind of quiet sadness about her, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. When she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. Then she vanished. One day she was there, the next, gone. The local news reported it as a missing person case, but nobody seemed particularly concerned. People disappeared in Hollow Creek. It was part of the town's charm, or so some claimed. The nightmares intensified after her disappearance. The fragmented images started to coalesce. The dirt floor became a cellar. The flickering candle illuminated a rough-hewn wooden door. And the whispering was getting louder, clearer. I started to make out words. Sacrifice, the earth hungers, hollow, driven by a gnawing sense of dread and a desperate need to prove I wasn't completely insane. I started investigating. I began with Hemlock's Curios. Old Man Hemlock was a fixture in Hollow Creek, a wizened recluse who'd been running the shop for as long as anyone could remember. He was a collector of oddities, a purveyor of forgotten things. The shop itself was a labyrinth of dusty shelves and cluttered tables, filled with everything from antique clocks to taxidermied animals. He eyed me suspiciously when I walked in, his gaze sharp and unsettling. "Can I help you, son?" he rasped, his voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. "I'm looking for information about Sarah Jenkins," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "She was renting a room upstairs." He narrowed his eyes. "Sarah? Yes, I remember her. Nice girl." Pity she left so suddenly. Did she say anything about where she was going? He shrugged. Said she was looking for something she lost. Did she find it? He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Some things are best left lost, son. Some things should never be found." His words sent a chill down my spine. I spent the next few days lurching around the shop, watching Hemlock, trying to glean some clue, some hint of what might have happened to Sarah. I felt like a character in one of those noir films my dad used to watch, only I was less Humphrey Bogart and more, just pathetic. The townsfolk weren't exactly welcoming either. Hollow Creek was a tight-knit community, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders, especially one like me, the town pariah. I could feel their eyes on me, hear their whispers behind my back. "There goes crazy Elias. He's at it again." Poor Margaret and Robert. I tried to ignore them, but their words burrowed into my brain, reinforcing my own self-doubt. Maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was just imagining things. Then I had the breakthrough. The nightmare was more vivid than ever. I saw the cellar, the door, the flickering candle. But this time, I also saw a symbol etched into the door. A spiral within a circle. I woke up gasping, scrambling for a pen and paper. I drew the symbol, my hand trembling. I recognized it. I'd seen it before, tucked away in a dusty book about local folklore at the Hollow Creek Library. It was an ancient symbol, associated with pagan rituals and earth worship. It was said to be a gateway, a connection between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The book also mentioned a series of disappearances in Hollow Creek, dating back centuries. People vanishing without a trace, leaving behind no clues. The disappearances were always linked to periods of unrest or hardship, times when the town was struggling. The earth hungered. That night, I dreamt of Sarah. She was in the cellar, tied to a wooden post. Her eyes were wide with terror. She was alive, but she wouldn't be for long. I knew I had to do something. I went to the police. Detective Inspector Davies was a weary, world-worn man with a permanent frown etched into his face. He listened to my story with a mixture of skepticism and pity. "Mr. Avrendres, Thorne," he said, his voice flat. "I understand you've had some difficulties in the past." "I know how it sounds, Detective," I said, "but I'm telling you the truth. Sarah Jenkins is in danger. She's being held captive in a cellar beneath Hemlock's curios." He sighed. "We've already searched the premises, Mr. Thorne. Mr. Hemlock has been cooperative. There's no sign of Miss Jenkins." "But you didn't search the cellar," I insisted. "It's hidden. There's a secret entrance." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes piercing. "Mr. Thorne, I appreciate your concern, but I can't act on the basis of dreams." He was right, of course. It was insane, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was running out of time. Desperate, I turned to Dr. Holloway. I told her everything, about the nightmares, the symbol, the disappearances. I expected her to dismiss me, to tell me I was having a relapse, but to my surprise, she listened. "Elias," she listened. "Elias," she said, her voice thoughtful. "I've been doing some research into Hollow Creek's history. There are some unusual things, legends, folklore, things that don't quite add up." She paused. "I'm not saying I believe you, but I'm not saying I don't believe you either. There's something strange going on in this town. And maybe, just maybe, your dreams are tapping into it." She agreed to help me, secretly. She couldn't officially endorse my investigation, but she offered her support and guidance. She even helped me research the pagan symbol, uncovering more details about its connection to ancient rituals. Together, we pieced together a disturbing picture. Hollow Creek wasn't just a sleepy little town. It was a place with a dark secret, a place where ancient forces still held sway. The disappearances weren't random. They were sacrifices, offerings to appease something that dwelled beneath the town, something that fed on fear and despair. And Sarah Jenkins was the next offering. I knew what I had to do. I had to get Sarah out, even if it meant risking my own life. I went back to Hemlock's Curios, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a desperate hope. The shop was eerily quiet, the air thick with the smell of dust and decay. Old Man Hemlock wasn't there. I slipped behind the counter, searching for the secret entrance to the cellar. I remembered the layout of the shop from my nightmares, the placement of the shelves, the location of the hidden door. I found it behind a bookcase, concealed by a cleverly disguised latch. I pulled the latch, and the bookcase swung open, revealing a narrow, winding staircase leading down into darkness. The air grew cold and damp as I descended, the smell of earth and decay growing stronger. I could hear the whispering again, faint but insistent. Sacrifice. The earth hungers. Hollow. The staircase opened into a large earthen cellar. A single candle flickered on a rough-hewn wooden table, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. And there, tied to a wooden post in the center of the room, was Sarah Jenkins. Her eyes widened when she saw me, relief flooding her face. You came," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm getting you out of here," I said, fumbling with the ropes that bound her. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here, Elias." Old Man Hemlock stepped into the light, his eyes gleaming with a strange, fanatical intensity. He held a rusty knife in his hand. "You've interfered with things you don't understand," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "The earth demands a sacrifice." It's the only way to keep Hollow Creek safe." "Safe from what?" I demanded. "From the darkness," he said. "From the hunger. It's always been here, Elias, waiting. We must appease it. We must offer it what it craves." He lunged at me, the knife glinting in the candlelight. I dodged, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I hadn't been in a fight since I was a kid, but I wasn't about to let this crazy old man kill Sarah. We grappled, struggling for control of the knife. Hemlock was surprisingly strong for his age, his grip like iron. I managed to disarm him, the knife clattering to the floor. But then he smiled, a chilling, knowing smile. "You can't stop it, Elias," he said. "It's too late." He raised his hands and began to chant, his voice growing louder, more frantic. The whispering in the cellar intensified, swirling around us like a vortex. The candle flickered violently, threatening to go out. The ground began to tremble. I felt a surge of terror, a primal fear I'd never experienced before. I knew what was happening. The entity beneath Hollow Creek was awakening. I didn't know what to do. I was just a broken architect, haunted by nightmares. I was no hero. But I couldn't let Sarah die. I grabbed the knife from the floor and held it out, my hand shaking. Hemlock stared at me, his eyes wide with anticipation. "Do it, Elias," he urged. "Do it for Hollow Creek." I looked at Sarah, her eyes pleading. I looked at Hemlock, his face contorted with fanaticism. I looked at the knife, its blade glinting in the candlelight. And then I made a decision. I turned the knife on Hemlock. He gasped, a look of shock and disbelief on his face as the blade plunged into his chest. He slumped to the ground, the chanting stopping abruptly. The trembling subsided. The whispering faded. The candle flickered, then steadied. The cellar was silent. I stood there for a long moment, staring at Hemlock's lifeless body. I had just killed a man. I released Sarah from the post and we stumbled out of the cellar into the cool night air. We ran until we reached the edge of town, collapsing on the side of the road, gasping for breath. We were safe. For now. Detective Inspector Davies arrived a few hours later, sirens wailing, lights flashing. He looked at me and Sarah, then at the antique shop, then back at me. "What happened here, Mr. Thorne?" he asked, his voice grim. I told him everything, about the nightmares, the disappearances, the rituals, Hemlock's madness. I told him about the entity beneath Hollow Creek, the darkness that craved sacrifice. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When I was finished, he sighed. "Mr. Thorne," he said, "we found Mr. Hemlock dead in his cellar. He appears to have been stabbed." He paused. "Miss Jenkins claims she was kidnapped and held against her will. She says you rescued her." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Is that what happened, Mr. Thorne?" I nodded. "Yes, Detective. That's what happened." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he simply nodded. "All right, Mr. Thorne," he said. "We'll take it from here. I was arrested, held for questioning, accused of murder. Everyone doubted my story except Sarah. She testified on my behalf, confirming everything I said. Eventually, the charges were dropped. Self-defense, they called it. But I knew the truth. I had killed a man, not to save Sarah, but to save myself, to prove that I wasn't crazy, to silence the nightmares. But the nightmares didn't stop. They changed. They were more vivid, more disturbing than ever. I still saw the cellar, the door, the flickering candle. But now I also saw Hemlock's face, his eyes filled with accusation. And I heard the whispering. "You have taken his place. The earth still hungers." "Hollow," I tried to tell Dr. Holloway, but she wouldn't listen. She said I was fixating again, that I needed to focus on my recovery. My parents were even worse. They were relieved that I was no longer considered crazy, but they were also terrified of what I had done. They treated me like a fragile object, afraid that I might break at any moment. I was alone. I knew what I had to do. I had to leave Hollow Creek. I had to escape the darkness that had consumed me. But as I packed my bags, I heard a knock on the door. It was a young woman, her face pale and drawn. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice trembling. I need your help. My sister, she's gone missing." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. She was last seen at Hemlock's Curios, and I knew. The cycle had begun again. The earth still hungered, and Hollow Creek was still hollow.